As the hart panteth after the water brooks, so panteth my soul after thee, the psalmist says. This is a lovely psalm. It speaks about spiritual desire. It uses the word thirst. My soul panteth after thee, O God. And then he says in verse number 2, my soul thirsteth for God. Thirst is a sign of life. All living creatures thirst. If you've got something that doesn't thirst, it's not alive. It's not living, it's dead. And the psalmist here is speaking of spiritual desire. Do you have a desire for God? That is a good symptom. It's a if you want to know if someone's dead or alive, you might check for a pulse. You would check their vital signs. Are they breathing? Do they have a pulse? Are they still with us? Are they still alive? And here is a sign of spiritual life. Do you have any thirst? Do you have any desire for God? Here we find in this portion of Scripture, it's a psalm. We sing these hymns and they have different verses to them. This, you might, Psalm 42, you might reckon is a hymn with 2 verses. There's 2 verses. The first verse of this hymn or this psalm speaks about thirst for God. He was thirsting. He was desiring God. And then as we come later on in the psalm, from about verse 5 or so, you get to the second verse. The second verse is about hoping in the Lord. The first verse, thirsting for the Lord. The second verse, hoping for the Lord. 2 powerful signs of life in the believer. Your vitals. Are you breathing? Do you have a pulse? Signs of life for the believer. Do you thirst for the Lord? Do you hope in the Lord? And this psalm was written at one of the occasion. Most believe that it says it's a psalm. It says to the chief musician, a maskil or a prayer is a type of prayer for the sons of Korah. David's name is not specifically given here, but it's almost undoubtedly one of David's psalms. Written during the occasion, most believe, while he was on the hunt from Saul. This is a wilderness psalm. He's fled away from Judah, away from the familiar places. In fact, he pines for those familiar places. He remembers when he used to meet together with his family and friends and worship God. But now he's far away from them. He's had to flee out of Judah, out of even the nation of Israel itself. He's gone into foreign lands where there are foreign gods and foreign dangers. And there, in the midst, as he's on the run in a desert wilderness place, most believe that he was likely physically thirsty as he was writing this psalm. He had gone maybe some time, a day or 2, without water. And his physical thirst reminded him of a greater thirst. My soul thirsteth for God. As he was hiding there in enemy territory in the wilderness, in an alien land, he begins to thirst. And he doesn't thirst for home and the comforts of home. He might say, here I am in the wilderness. I wish I was back in my bed. Wish I had my nice comfy pillow. I wish I could be there with my usual things. He doesn't thirst for his loved ones. It's likely at this time that David had already been married to Michal, Saul's daughter. He didn't say, I miss my wife. I wish I was with her. I'm a fugitive on the run. Or I miss my family. Oh, to see my father Jesse and to see my brethren. No, he had a heavenly thirst. As the hart panteth after the water brooks, so panteth my soul after thee, O God. What a wonderful thing. Let's look at this heavenly thirst. This is a thirst. He thirsts for the Lord. It's a thirst that extinguishes all other thirst. this thirst for God. And he gives the description of an animal, of a hart, or we might call it today a deer. As the hart panteth after the water brooks, so panteth my soul after thee, O God. This is a creature, the deer, the hart, is a creature that rarely ventures too far from the water. He riding, of course, in a desert context there in the wilderness. And I grew up in the desert. And if you wanted to find deer, I'm going to show my inner text in a little bit. Lots of people would go out deer hunting. And if you were in the desert and you wanted to know where the deer were, it was very easy. You go wherever the water is. Wherever there's even the smallest amount of water, you're going to find deer. They're going to be close by. They're a creature. The other creatures of the desert can go a long time without water, but not the deer. He stays close to the water. He's a thirsty creature. He's continually coming back. He's continually coming. He always wants to be near to it. He panteth after the brooks of water. He had to visit often. Again, other desert creatures can go a long time without water. We think of the camel. It was common in those parts of the world, wasn't it? In the Middle East, you'd find these camels, and the camel could go several days, over weeks without water. He says, I don't thirst for God like the camel. I just need an occasional drink. Or even, in that part of the world, they have this a feline called the sand cat. And the sand cat can go several weeks, over a month, without water. He says, I don't want to be like the sand cat. There's a kangaroo rat in some deserts. And the kangaroo rat, it beats them all. The kangaroo rat can go its entire life without ever once drinking water. It gets all the water it needs from the little food that it eats here and there. He says, I don't long for God like the kangaroo rat. I long as the deer, the creature that comes often, that thirsts often, that pants after the water brooks. And as the hart panteth for the water, so panteth and thirsteth my soul for God. And he goes a step further in the second verse. He says, my soul thirsteth for God, for the living God. This is very important. Look, there are many people out there that thirst after religion. While you are devoutly attending a church service, there are many others around you who will devoutly attend their place of worship. They'll devoutly go to their temple. They'll devoutly go to their mosque. They'll devoutly go to whatever it is they call their meeting place. It's not just enough to thirst after God. He says, I am thirsting after the living God. We imagine David in a foreign land surrounded by false gods. In those days, one of the things that was commonly done, they had the gods of the groves. And so you would walk into these places where trees were planted, and they would have the images, the faces carved on nearly every tree. At one point, you get these descriptions in the Old Testament. You could scarcely walk by a tree without seeing some pagan image there, some dead image carved into the side of a tree. He says, that's not what my soul thirsts after. I'm not after those false gods, gods made of wood and stone and gold and silver. I thirst after the living God. He didn't desire a God that was made in his own image. That's a very important thing. You meet people who claim to be religious. You can usually tell it out this way. If somebody says, well, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. And well, what do you believe? Well, I like to borrow something from every religion. I was listening to someone who was being interviewed by a street evangelist, and they said, I like some of the things that Christianity teaches, and I like some things from Buddhism, and I like some things. Here's what I do. They said, I just take a little bit of this, take a little bit of that, I throw it all in the pot, and I've got my own broth. And this person, they may have some type of spiritual thirst, but it is not a thirst for the living God. It's a God that only lives in their imagination. He says, I thirst for the living God. You know, David wasn't after dead knowledge. Again, there are some people even who would come and they would attend very regularly and be a part of very sound churches. And they come because they want to learn about God. I want to learn about God. I want to learn all the great doctrines. I want to learn what is in all the books of the Bible and the great history of the Bible and all the great themes of the Bible. I want to learn all the confessions, all the creeds, and all about all the Christians who have come and the reformers and all these great people and great things. And they want to pile up all this great knowledge. And, you know, knowledge is a good thing. I don't think Christians ought to be ignorant of the Bible. I think Christians ought to learn the Bible. You ought to know what is in the book. You ought to learn the message in all 66 books of the Bible. You ought to know the great doctrines of the faith and what they mean and how to speak about them. But he wasn't just after a dead knowledge. I don't want to know just more about God. It is good to know about God. I want to know God himself. I want to thirst after the living God, he says. And when shall I come and appear before God? Look, our God is alive. He is a living God. You don't want to know one of the great powerful truths? Because our God is alive, because he is the living God, it is possible for you to know him. It is possible for you to draw near unto him. It is possible for you to have a relationship with him. Did you know it's possible to have a relationship with any living person? Maybe unlikely, some people, but it is possible that you could get to know someone very famous, a celebrity even, or to get to know some great person. It's possible for me to have a great relationship with the Prime Minister. Now, it's unlikely that I would ever meet the Prime Minister. But while I'm alive and he's alive, it's possible that I would get to know him and that we might become friends, that we would know each other quite well and learn about each other. Why? Because he's still alive. It's unlikely, but it is possible. But do you know what's impossible? It's impossible for me to have a great relationship with Winston Churchill. It's impossible for me to have a great relationship with Margaret Thatcher or some other prime ministers that have gone in the past. Do you know why? Because they're dead. Yeah. I will never know them. I can learn about them. I can open up biographies and go to Wikipedia and listen to old radio broadcasts. But I'll never know them because they're dead. Our God is a living God, and because of that, it is possible to know him. And he has gone even further. He has made for us to know him. We are dead. So we would say in our dead in our sin, we can't know God. But he has made a way through his Son, Jesus Christ. Through the quickening spirit of the Holy Ghost. For us to know the living God. And our great desire ought to know, to thirst for the living God, to know him. For this ultimate end, he says, when shall I appear before him? When shall I come to appear before my God? I want to know God while I'm living on this earth, because there's coming a day when I'm going to stand before him, when I will appear before God. And the great desire, the great joy of heaven is that there's coming a day when we will appear before him. We read the chapter in Revelation chapter 21, and what a beautiful chapter. And in that chapter, he describes in great glory the New Jerusalem. In chapter 22, he goes on to describe the new heaven and the new earth, and what a wonderful place. But the greatest joy of it, the Bible tells us that we will ever be with the Lord. The tabernacle of God is with men, that he will be with us. He will be our God, and we shall be his people, and we will ever be with him with no separation. will appear before him one day. And may the Lord give us that great desire, that spiritual thirst for the Lord. That as we will be with him, and when we are with him, we'll desire him. But while now we are absent in the body, that our soul and our spirit would have that great spiritual thirst for the Lord. And we might say the opposite, that our greatest grief would be when we are far away from him. Look at verse number 3. He says, "My tears have been my meat day and night, while they continually say unto me, where is my God? Is thy God?" You know, David could have cried over many things, and would have been somewhat justified in doing it. He could have cried and said, "Why does Saul hate me so unjustly? Why do his soldiers, who I was once a captain of, hunt me down so ruthlessly? Why am I forsaken by loved ones and family and friends?" But the subject of his tears was he felt not that his family and friends were far away from me, not that people had betrayed him, although he does bring some of those cares and concerns in some of the other Psalms. But his tears night and day, because he says, "Where is thy God?" He feels far away from the Lord. And it was a great grief of him that he thought that God was far away from him. We can make an application here that I think is a practical application. If you're a child of God and you want to thirst for the living God, learn to hate the things that drive him away from you. Learn to hate the things that would drive a wedge between your soul and the Savior. I would highly recommend, if you've not read it before, to pick up a copy of The Holy War by John Bunyan. Many of you are familiar with Pilgrim's Progress, and rightly so, but you need to read the second great work by John Bunyan, and that's the Holy War. In the Holy War, he goes on to describe not only the conversion of a man, it's all about the battle for man's soul, is the name of this great city. But in that book, he gives one of the most telling parts of the book is he gets a detailed description of how a soul backslides away from God. And how the Lord slowly withdrew himself from the city of man's soul. And those that dwelled in the city, or a picture of the human soul, weren't even recognizing that their Lord had gone away until he was gone out of the city. And then there was great difficulty in bringing him back in again. Oh, may we hate the things that separate us from him. And when we do feel far from God, may it be our tears day and night. And so he says in the 4th verse, "When I remember these things, I pour out my soul in me. For I had gone with the multitude. I went with them to the house of God, with a voice of joy and praise, and with a multitude that kept holy day." But because he thirsted with the living God, his greatest desire was to be with God, to be near to God, that he was a man who loved the great habit of meeting together with God's people. Here he's mourning over the fact that now that he's in a desert place, he's in a wilderness, he's far away from his loved ones, he is missing out on the habit of going out into the house of the Lord with God's people. He says, I remember going with the multitudes. I remember going with them to the house of the Lord. I remember praising God with a voice of joy and praise. I remember going on the holy days. He's, of course, referring to the Sabbath, but also to the other days. The very special days that were given in the Jewish calendar when the congregation of people would gather together to praise and to worship God. He had this great habit of going to the house of the Lord. Now, we know this is not maybe a 100% like-for-like comparison, but again, we can make a great application. You know, there are many reasons why you should gather together with God's people in a church. You might go for the habit of it, and I would highly recommend the habit of faithfully attending church. You might go to be seen of others. I don't recommend doing that, of course. Well, I just go so people will see me. You might go to learn from God and His Word, and that's a good thing. But the greatest motive is greater than all.